Welcome to today's show where we're digging into mandates, totalitarians, rebels, and the game of creating with magic. So a few topics to cover off on. I had an article banned by FB around a month ago. In fact, I've had many articles and different things that I have produced in the way of content off many of the major platforms over the last 2 years, which is kind of fascinating to me because I wouldn't consider myself a dangerous human being or a rebel in the slightest little bit. Maybe a bit of a thinker, but certainly not a dangerous human being. So it's been quite fascinating to see how much of my content just gets banned at the moment by FB, by YT. I've got to be careful even the words that I use. So super interesting. Now, the article that I wrote was actually a leadership article for business. And I was using the poor example of many of the major governments in the world at this point in regards to poor leadership, because a good quality leader wants to be able to enroll and bring people on board and on side. That's I spent years sailing on open ocean yachts, and it's the same thing. The captain brings everyone on board. It's the same with any form of team. As a rugby player, it's the same thing. All the good captains would bring everybody on board. In business, you bring everybody on board. That's what you want to do. You want to get as much buy-in as possible. So this particular article I wrote was all around government's response to that word that starts with a V. Again, I've got to be careful about what I say because I just get kicked off everything at this point in time. And this is not about the V itself. It's about how it's being communicated. So I have a whole bunch of people that are totally on board. They want to get vaccinated. And I know a whole bunch of people that are off it for whatever reason. And today isn't about that per se. It's about the division that's happening in society and poor leadership. So we've observed in the press and the media here in Australia the way that anyone that doesn't want to get the jab is communicated about. And basically there's been a witch hunt, a demonization of them, and that just doesn't work. That just doesn't work. As a human being who is fascinated by human behavior, I have, as I said, friends from all walks of life, and also I follow everyone. So a lot of people have left the major platforms that are sort of against what's happening in the world at this point in time. They're against the mandates. They're against lockdowns. They're against. So they go and they start working in these networks that are off the mainstream platforms, and I follow them, and it's really interesting to observe their viewpoints, because when the governments move in a certain way, they just go further underground. So there's no bringing on of anyone when you communicate in a particular way where you demonize a group. And we start to take this to the second thing. I'm going to go into the article in a moment that actually got me kicked off FB. But we're also looking at another element here where mandating is a huge issue and challenge, because medical mandates are a real ethical and philosophical issue. And I think people have a real right to be concerned about mandates. See, if we weren't in this supposed crises, just think about how long it would take to get mandate to take the jab through a normal court system as an example, that the medical profession can mandate that they have control over what you do with your body. I don't think it would ever get through a court system in normal times. This is the stuff of totalitarian regimes. Now, just quickly, I talk to a lot of people that are really for the mandates. And if you're really for the mandates, I understand the viewpoint. The viewpoint would typically be along the lines of, this is for the good of the people. It is for the good of all. And I get that. And so those people, again, the challenge is they don't see the other side, where the other side are like, how dare you tell me what I'm allowed to do with my body? How dare you tell me that I have to do this thing with my body? And from their perspective, if we take it outside of the V, there's reason for them to feel the way they do. There's actually reasons for both sides feeling the way they do. They're like, and this will head into why I got kicked off FB. They're going, okay, so we get mandated at this time. What's the next mandate that we get? Now, typically, some of that's already sort of going, we're not feeling very good about these mandates. They are already not trusting authority. And from their perspective, they have many reasons not to trust authority. Okay, many, many reasons. I just saw again in France or something, the Catholic Church. I think about my mum. My mum thought, the priest was just incredible, right? Priest was amazing. And that the church was amazing. My poor mother, she went through that entire period of time where we just saw that the church was full of what we call, in the Jungian terms, the shadow, full of pedophiles and child abusers. Okay, but for years, this is an authority group saying, "Oh, you must trust us, you must respect us. We're closer to God." We can see the pharmaceutical. I've got to be careful. I guess get kicked off or anything. The pharmaceutical companies, just go right into Google, biggest criminal fines of all time. Okay, and you're just going to see who's paid those fines. It is the pharmaceutical companies. Okay, so again, you've got these whole factions of people with a real right not to trust authority and not to trust those big companies and not to trust those that are being asked to be disrespected just because of their position. And historically, they have a right not to trust. We constantly see, we've seen police forces, right? My mum, same thing. My mum just deeply respected the police force. If the policeman said, whatever the policeman said, she would respect. And same with lawyers. And my poor mum, right? All these organisations fell from grace in front of her eyes, just right in front of her eyes. Royal commissions into police corruption, right? So here we go. We just come back to it. So I get kicked off FB for calling out governments and their poor leadership in regards to, if you want to enroll people into the V that are V hesitant or AV, then you're going about it the wrong way, demonizing them, making them wrong, just expecting them to believe you and trust you. And when they don't, just demonizing them, right? Because they're just going underground. You've just given them more proof around why they can't trust you and why they shouldn't trust you. So quality leadership, and this was the main thrust of the article that got me kicked off FB, would start with, instead of demonizing an outlying group, you would, as a good quality leader, admit vulnerabilities, admit fallibilities. when have you seen a politician do that? I've seen one over the last 2 years. It was Anders Tingle in Sweden. And that's an interesting case study, what's happened in Sweden, by the way. Anyway, so a quality leader, instead of demonizing, you build bridges. You build bridges through admitting fallibility. So as an example, it might be great for politicians to say something like this. Look, we accept that the pharmaceutical companies have stuffed up a lot. They're a major cause and the main cause of the opioid crisis in America. Yes, they have been up to no good, buying out lobbyists. They've done a lot of things wrong. They've got the biggest criminal fines in history. Okay, these are facts. All these people know it. And so if you admit that as a politician, you're going, okay, we get it. Now, the moment that you admit something, it's like if I say sorry to my wife, okay? If I make a mistake and I say sorry to my wife, the moment I say sorry to my wife and it's heartfelt, she will move towards me. She will move towards me because this is one of the powers of being vulnerable. You start to set up trust. If you can be truthful, accept your fallibilities, your mistakes, and at this point, governments are aligning with the pharmaceutical companies. So the moment they just ignore that and expect everyone to respect their viewpoint without buying and addressing the challenges and behaviours that have gone on with these companies for years, they've got Buckleys of bringing people on side. So I'm sorry. Yes, this is the truth. This is the case. This is what's gone on in the past with these pharmaceutical companies. We're sorry. This is not happening at this point in time. So bridge building is really, really important. Admitting faults from the past is super important. Hey, honey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it. I've done this. It's just a terrible thing to do. At that point, my wife can now move in and we can start to build a relationship and have a communication and connection. That's what I got kicked off FB for. And by the way, if you don't think that we live in an incredibly controlled society at this point in regards to information, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. You're under a rock. You probably shouldn't even be listening to me if you're not aware of that. Okay, you're controlled by agendas. So again, just to finish this off, you know, if they want to reach people, if you want a good quality society, I like love, right? You can think love is fluffy. It's not fluffy. I work with people from all walks of life every day of my life and have done for over 35 years. And love is, look, just extend goodwill, right? Be a human being. Meet them. You mightn't agree with their viewpoint. You mightn't agree with their beliefs. But treating people with respect and regard when they're differently to you goes a long way. And it builds relationship. It builds connection. And then we can start debating, okay? Now, once there's trust, magic can happen. You can change people's viewpoints. So again, I really understand why people look at governments at this point and go, my God, they're totalitarians, fascists. And that's exactly how they appear. Again, just finishing that off, the fascists and the totalitarians, many of them think they're doing the right thing. Maybe they are. Okay, maybe they are, but they have a very fascist and totalitarian regime of doing that, and they will only create division and to create less trust and drive people underground. And as I said, I follow everyone. I follow both left and right wing media. I just follow everything and everyone because I want to understand human behaviour. Got kicked off Twitter last year because I must have been considered some extreme right winger because of the people I follow. Again, very weird. This propaganda sort of control of what we're allowed to hear, see, or be involved with. Okay, and I'm just going to finish up with something that's super important to me, and it's about creating. And mastering creating is probably the most important thing a human being can do, because while we are alive, we are creating 24/7. Okay, And you're either creating consciously or you're creating unconsciously. So when you're creating unconsciously, you're a robot, and you're a robot who's been conditioned to believe and think certain things. Okay, so as an example, this morning, I'm going to be talk about my wife a lot. I love my wife, I have a good relationship with her, but she's also really good for sharing things in regards to teaching. I saw my wife, I've been with her for, I don't know, some 26 years or something like that. And I meet my wife, and I'm wake up and I see her and she sees me, and I'm beaming. I'm really just super excited to see my wife. Right? I've seen her every day for many, many years, but here I am. I'm waking up, and here she is again, and I'm here with my beloved and my best friend, and I'm just so excited and so happy. Okay, now, believe it or not, that's creating. Okay, that's creating. Now, my wife, when she meets that energy from me, feels loved, she feels respected, and what she'll do is she's going to be kinder to me. That's what we call the law of reciprocity. And so this is why my wife and I tend to have a very good relationship. Okay, so I was creating at that point in time, and that's unconscious for me now. I don't have to do any work to be that way. I just am that way with her, because this thing here has opened up. There's lots of wounds have been healed, blocks have disappeared, and I feel safe in intimacy and to share my love with her. So that very act created a response from her. Not only that, my body would have been coursing with likes of oxytocin, dopamine. So I was creating a better health profile through that. Now, if I go back 25, 30 years, if I woke up next to her or any other lady that I was with at the time, I would have had a shut down body, and my heart would have been closed, because on the unconscious level, I would have gone, oh, don't get too close to them, because I'm ashamed of myself. So if I get too close, they're going to find out about me, and I don't want that to happen. So that at that point in time, because that's how I was programmed to be, right? At that point in time, I'd wake up in the morning, and that's what I'm creating. Okay, that's what I'm creating. And my partner at the time, she would have felt that, and she would have felt a little bit, even if it wasn't consciously, it'd be unconsciously suspicious of me, and she would have withdrawn from me. Okay, so this is just an example of how we are constantly creating. So that past, when I talked about when I was wake up with my partner at the time, 30 years ago, the belief systems, the wounds that I carried, the blocks that I carried, the shutting down of the heart to protect myself so that they wouldn't see what I was ashamed of in myself, which decreases intimacy, that was creating. It created cycles in relationships. And at that point in time, I was unconscious, meaning I had all these belief systems and these behaviors that were driving me that I couldn't even see or even begin to understand. Right? So then the relationship wouldn't work out, and I'd go, oh, maybe she wasn't the right one, whatever was going on. No, I was just creating based on my belief systems. So this happens constantly and all the time. So if you want to know how I got from where I was to how I am with my wife, it's because I started to go, what is it in me that keeps creating these outcomes? So what is it in me within a relationship that moves me away from intimacy, moves me away from connection with the feminine? And then I could start to see, and I could start to own, and then I started to be conscious. And so once I could see and start to own what it was that was stopping me getting what I wanted, and then I could start to move into, well, what I really want is a really good, loving relationship. And now I'm starting to move with that, hold that in consciousness, being aware of the patterns that come up that go to undermine that. And this just starts to bring us to a magical element in some way, because people don't understand this. And again, if you haven't done a lot of inner work, and you haven't done a lot of what we'd consider ego transcending work, then your sense of self is, you don't even know what and who you are, because you're only identified with the ego structure. So beyond the ego structure, we are immense. We are just incredible in what we are. That's you too, okay? But your framework, you're so locked into your framework, okay, of what you are, your identity. Babies have a far greater connection to who and what they really are, okay, to who and what they really are, because they don't have the hardened identity. So we have the ability to create and manifest. So when we're able to hold in consciousness something, because we live in a quantum. So we are immense, we live in an immense universe, and we're part of that. And we are actually transmitting and receiving machines, okay, part of the quantum soup. So when we hold in consciousness what it is that we actually want, while at the same time bringing up and letting go of belief structures and things that are unsupportive of creating what we want, we start to engage with a magic. And many of you will have experienced synchronicity, where you are moving and just really holding on to what it is you're wanting to create, what it is you want to create. You prove to yourself that you really want that because you're willing to face your fears, let go of old belief systems, and all of a sudden, like magic, something starts to turn up that's very supportive of you creating what you want. So this stuff's really important. And by the way, if you're interested in this, if you're interested in some of the political stuff that we were talking about before, I run a weekly get-together with a group, and it is called Vortex Rebirth. It's really needed at this point in time because of what's happening in society. And we talk about what's happening in the world, and we talk about moving in a different way. We talk about moving and creating from love, and we're looking at even how we create communities and societies that are a bit more enlightened, a bit more awakened, with the absence of greed and the absence of power. And if you know me, I'm not talking about, I love money. Money's super, super important. But when power and status becomes the driving force of individuals, societies, politicians, those in power, and that desire for power and status overrides their desire for love, for connectedness and togetherness, we know that we are in trouble. So in this Vortex Rebirth, and you'll see a link below, we talk a lot about how we can move and create better things for ourselves and create better things for our families and for society in general. Anyway, I hope you got a lot from today. Interesting stuff, and I'll see you next time. Catch you.